This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing.
Well, hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Throstle Club. It's the programme all about West Bromwich Albion's marvellous history, with an emphasis on this particular month, so a September bias to this programme. Now, as usual, I'm joined by the former Sports Argus man Bob Downing, and his form rate has been excellent so far this season, so let's hope it continues like that today.
I certainly hope so, Norman.
So, welcome, welcome indeed. And sitting opposite is Black Country Radio's very own Billy Spakeman. He can't wait to start twiddling his knobs and sliding his levers in his usual manner, can you?
No, I'm very good at knob twiddling.
And now our special studio guest today is none other than the esteemed local journalist David Instone of the Express and Star fame. So, hello to you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be invited.
And no doubt we'll have plenty to talk about in this edition of the Throstle Club. So welcome then to our special guest, David Instone, a man with a fantastic knowledge of both West Bromwich Albion and also, it must be said, Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think. So tell us a little bit about yourself to start us off, David.
Well, I've only ever had one career. That's as a sports writer. Gentleman on my right was an enormous benefit to myself, a mentor. He probably doesn't even know it, going back to the mid-1970s. I was hopeless. I was just drifting along at school. I hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do. And then I eventually twigged on at about the age of 15, having delivered the Express and Star for 3 or 4 years. I suddenly realised, well, there seemed to be a few guys out there getting paid to actually go and cover football, cricket and whatnot, and my other sporting loves. So I thought, well, okay, I don't rate myself as being particularly good at anything else. I'll give that a bash. So I sort of made a few inquiries. I remember my dad saying... at one point, because we were very avid Express and Star readers, my dad said, well, you know, Bob Downing's the Albion correspondent. You read his stuff every night in the paper. Why don't you make some contact with him, just see if he can offer you any advice, career advice. So I did that, wrote to Bob, and he very kindly invited me along to shadow him at an Albion-Sheffield Wednesday match, which I'm sure Bob has long since forgotten. He probably saw me more as a stalker than anything else, but he was great. I mean, it's strange how you remember these things, Bob. I remember coming to an office on, I'll describe it as West Brom High Street. It was between the town and the M5 junction, and you had the Express and Star had a building. I think it was just in an old house, and you and one or two of the reporters were in there on a Saturday morning. I remember you saying, we've been sat around all morning and we've been talking about the Leslie Whittle case. I think the poor girl's body had just been found that morning, if the listeners remember that case, and that story was big in the news. Anyway, that afternoon, on a happier note, you took me off to the game, and you know, from then on, I just made a few inquiries and got in probably the same route as Bob, in through weekly newspapers, and then eventually into the evening paper sector.
That fun enough, that building you were talking about, when the Express and Star moved to Black Lake, we obviously moved out of that place, and it became a massage parlour.
Was there a bit?
Well. And guess who was last to move out?
I was there too early.
Was that you, Ozzy? There then, Bob.
Well, put those photographs away, Billy. This is the radio. We don't want to upset the listeners even more than we need to. Well, we'll talk about a bit more about your career, the journalistic side of it, a little bit later. But it's really apt that you're here today with your interest in both the Black Albion and the Wolves, because it's exactly 30 years ago this month, isn't it, Bob, since a big fantastic game between Albion and Wolves.
It was
fantastic for an Albion fan, that is.
Well, yeah, he was for an Albion fan. I mean, everybody remembers the Darren Bradley screamer. Yeah, that was I think that was the pick of all the goals that they scored.
Yeah, just to set the scene for younger folk, because we're talking about 30 years ago
Yeah.
here, Albion thrashed Wolves 3-2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the most fantastic goals that Darren Bradley's ever likely to score, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the interesting aside as well about both of those games was that playing for the Wolves in the first game was Cyril Regis. And it was the one time, really, that, you know, when they read the teams out and they said the opposition and everybody boos, all the home fans all boo, got to Cyril Regis and it was an applause from the Albion fans. So they still remembered. And the other one, the second game, Steve Bull was centre forward for the Wolves and got injured. He scored a goal, put Wolves ahead. And he got injured. And who was the substitute? Cyril Regis.
Right, astonishing, yeah. Do you remember much about that game? You were there for the Express and Star that day, David.
I was. I remember it being an absolutely terrific game. Sunday afternoon, if I remember right, live on TV. I think we had probably, I don't know, it wasn't Sky, I don't think, but whoever,
No.
I don't know who was covering it, but maybe Central TV. Yeah, outstanding game. I think Wolves led, then perhaps led 2-1 or got it back to 2-2, and Kevin Donovan got the winner. Remember at the
He
Birmingham Road
did
end?
the famous three fingers to represent the goals, the
Yeah.
3-3-2, which got a
Yeah.
lot of publicity at the time. And Wayne Fereday, who laid on the pass in the build-up to that, I recently spoke to him, and we've got a nice clip coming up here now of Wayne, and he was actually saying it was one of the best games that he's ever played in.
I mean, some of the games, though, you know, obviously the main one for me, which I'm always going to remember, is the Wolves. The 3-2, the Kevin Donovan, three fingers 2. And I think I'm always going to, as an Albion fan, to beat the Wolves anyway, to play, to beat them, and to be, like you say, to be involved in the goal, the Darren Bradley goal, in whatever little bit, because you know, as a player, if you're going to set a goal up, you want to bomb down the wing, get to the ball and cross it in, and Big Cyril or somebody gets on the end of it, bang. But this was a simple, I put my head in, had a little run with a few yards, give it to, I think it was Andy Hunt. I think I played it to Hunty, he laid it round the corner and Bradders, bang. So to be involved in that goal as well. So I think that was the best game for me by a million miles.
It certainly was for the Albion fans that day. I recall being there as well. An interesting headline to your story, David, in the Express and Star: Albion bridge the wealth gap with real style was the headlines. So is that the days when Albion were more prosperous than Wolves at the time?
Well, I think that was the summer of Wolves' big spending. They'd basically redeveloped Molineux, and Sir Jack Hayward, having seen to the stadium, then ploughed a load of money into the team. So Bob mentioned Cyril. They'd also bought David Kelly, boyhood Albion fan, Peter Shirtliff, Kevin Keane, Jeff Thomas. So Wolves had spent big, and they were let's just say they weren't slow in promoting themselves as the promotion favourites, especially the chairman, Jonathan Hayward. Maybe that revved Albion up a bit on the day. It was an early season game, as you said, September. So yeah, I think Albion saw Wolves as a tasty scalp, and they brought them down, as they did at Molineux later in the season as well. But Wolves had started well and started that game well, but it quickly went a bit more downhill.
Indeed, yeah. Let's talk a bit more about your career then. So local derbies will obviously sort of the real exciting things for you each season, I suppose, but you must have seen some really good games, other games that you've been reporting on over the years.
I was fine with the local derbies. I used to breeze into the press room. I used to quite enjoy looking around some of the other guys who was like riddled with tension. Some of the people in there really had an absolute die-hard affinity to one club or the other. I was by then I was more sanitised. I could see it from both sides. I sort of felt as though I had a foot in both camps. Albion as the team I supported avidly as a boy, and Wolves as a club I got very close to professionally. So I just used to regard local derbies as, in a lot of ways, a day I couldn't lose, because whichever side won, I would be pleased for them. some people might say, yeah, you could only lose because not both of the teams could win. But I love them. But I don't think you ever take away don't think you ever replicate the thrill you feel as a young fan when you absolutely dyed in the wool and you've got firm commitment one way or the other. Like growing up, Albion Wolves, Albion Villa were massive games. Albion Blues in the '68 Cup semi-final, I remember. So I don't think you ever replicate that as a journalist. You look on it in a different way, Bob. You're more dispassionate. You're thrilled to be there. You're looking around, 30,000 people in the stadium. You think, well, it's not bad, is it, being paid to come and give your opinion on a massive local occasion like this?
Yeah.
But it's not. It isn't quite the same as being on the terraces when you're a kid, and it means more than anything else.
That's right. I mean, you have to separate yourself from virtually everything that's going on. I remember. When I was on the Chronicle and Albion played QPR in the League Cup. Oh, do I have to mention that? And played him in the League Cup final. And there was a couple of journalists from one of the London weeklies, and they were dancing on the tables. And you think, sit down, pal. If you think this is good, you wait till if you ever get into the first division. No, but I mean that's it. You have to detach yourself. You're there to do a job, and especially in a local derby. There's going to be supporters of both teams reading your report. You've got to be fair. You can't bias one way or the other. I mean, obviously, if a team's playing badly, you say they're playing badly. But, generally, you have to keep yourself neutral.
Mm. Yep, fair comment. Yeah, I mean, I once or twice I had sort of comments, angry readers' letters arising from Wolves Albion games, which was quite unpleasant, but just came with the territory. You just. Yeah. I remember. To be fair, one match when Wolves won at the Hawthorns, Ewan Roberts got a hat trick. That was a Sunday game as well, and I remember a fan complained to the paper about my write-up, and Tony Hale, to his credit and to my gratitude, stepped forward and he became involved in it, and he said, well, I didn't find David to report biased at all, and he spoke up very nicely. And I thought in my piece, I said how strongly Albion had come at Wolves on that day. Wolves ended up winning 4-2, but Albion had a real go in the second half, had a goal disallowed, and so as Bob says, you've always got to try and be balanced through the pressure of the occasion and the tension of it. You've got to be balanced and keep a clear head.
Yeah, they're talking about pressure and stuff. So I'm always intrigued by this. You're sitting there in the press box, knowing full well you've got to get things right, and you can't always see what bit of action, what's going on. Your view's obscured or something. So, what's it like in the press box with other people helping you? Do rival journalists regard each other as rivals? Do they help each other out? When you say who scored that, what happened there, that kind of stuff.
Basically, I mean, if I was working, if I was doing the Albion, Dave was doing the Wolves, and it had been an Albion Wolves derby, he's making notes. I'm making notes. There's going to be times when you're not looking at the game at all because you're making a note. Something's happened. Something, as you know, in a football match can happen within seconds. And then you'll turn around and look at somebody and say, what happened there? Dave comes back and said, so-and-so passed, so-and-so just shot wide. Great, thanks very much. I mean, you see, the thing is, when you're covering a match or you're covering a team like me and Dave did, Albion, Dave was doing the Wolves, you can look at a player on the pitch and know exactly who it is, of a Wolves player or an Albion player in my case. When you got the opposition, you don't pick them up so quickly. If you see the number, that's fair enough. But if you don't see the number, the first thing you do is say to the guy who's following the team they're playing, who was that? And come back with the answer. I mean, they don't say, oh, you know, I'm keeping that to myself. I mean, it's hardly exclusive.
Yeah,
dead right. Total cooperation. When you're in the press box, there's a teamwork. You know, if something you haven't seen or something you want to, normally you double check.
Yeah.
I mean, just going on to that theme, I covered Albion against Nottingham Forest when Cloughy was manager at Nottingham Forest, and there was a journalist that Cloughy did not like. He was a national journalist. He did not like him, and basically it was a case of, if he's in that room, I'm not coming in.
Are you going to name him, Bob? Oh, all right.
Name and shame.
He's a fellow from the Times. And he said, if he's in there, I'm not coming in. So we never got about, I don't know, a dozen reporters and waiting for Cloughie. Matsy, Ray Mats, God bless him, he got this fella and he said, I think Cloughie's coming outside the other door. Shall we go and meet him? And he said yes. And he got him out the room, and as soon as he got out the room, Cloughie came in. Did all the interview. This guy obviously missed it. Matsy never missed a quote because we were all there ready and said, right, that's what he said. Yeah. And that's how you help each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting, yeah. It occurs to me as well, it's even more difficult to read the game sometimes with the players, with the kits they've got today, because in the old days you had a nice white patch on the back of the numbers, shirts, so it must be even more difficult to read such things from time to time these days as well.
I think everybody at the Albion has been delighted with the new strip.
Yeah.
Because of that great big white patch
clear,
at the back.
Indeed, yeah.
Very clear.
Yeah. And now reporting on matches and the technology has changed a lot over the years since you first started as well, hasn't it, David?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I talk about quite a lot now in my sort of more senior years, I go back to like the 70s when I was young and impressionable, and I would just go into a press room, shut up, but just listen to these guys. And Bob's just mentioned Ray Mats, Joe Melling. Help me out here, Bob. There was John Davis from down.
John Ragg.
John Ragg, yeah. Hugh Jameson.
Dave Orridge.
Yeah, Dave Harrison.
Dave Harrison, yeah.
And then the Poster Mail to me had tremendous sports writers, and a lot of them went on to national careers. Yeah, a lot of them. So I always looked up to the Poster Mail group. I thought they had good writers. So I would just go in, and it was easy for me to shut up because I was shy. But I just used to love listening to their stories. Now I go into a press room now, and everybody's on a laptop, and I don't know whether they're feeding social media or they're doing being professional and doing their research. But to me, there isn't the same sort of. If you say social, it makes it sound a little bit flippant, and you're not being professional. But it was just a place where you went, and I just learned so much, and it inspired me because I heard about their escapades, their what was going on in their working lives and sometimes in their social lives, and it just inspired me thinking, well, I'd like a bit of that, and I just learned from it. I don't think it happens now, but the profession has changed so much.
The biggest problem now is that if you want to talk to a player, you have to ask the club if you can have a word with him. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was doing it, when David started, we didn't have to do that. We actually went outside the players' room, at the Hawthorns, and waited for them to come out, and had a word with them then. And that's where it was so good, because you got the journalists. When Cyril made his debut and that League Cup game, everybody wanted to talk to Cyril, right? And obviously, we got the managers coming in, and we didn't know if Cyril was going to be there. So what we did, we delegated 2 or 3 journalists to go outside the players' room to wait for Cyril to come out. The others stayed in to get the managers. And when these interviews have been completed, we just got together and we just told everybody what going on. But you won't get that now, because the club will determine who comes in. Mm-hmm. And that's wrong. That's wrong. I watched Match of the Day on Saturday, and I was watching final score right at the end, and they're talking about talking to players, and they was talking about the game and whatever, and basically every player was giving the same answer. No matter who he played for, no matter what the result was, he would give in the same answer, and it tells you nothing.
Yeah. The other thing about it as well, of course, and then because they have a designated player to speak to, every journalist gets the same player. Yeah. So there's no depth after the game at all, talking to different players, is there? Because you just seem to get that same quote in each newspaper or whatever. That's right. Bob says you basically get who the media team are happy to put up for you. I don't think. I suppose the media still might request who they would like, but ultimately the manager or the head coach would have a say, the head of media would have a say, and they generally bring out who
who suits their agenda best.
Yeah, I suppose in a way you can obviously see why they do it, so they can keep a bit of control of what's going on. But also in this day of social media and things, the players have got to be careful what they say anyway. So it's an easy way of the club controlling it, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have Facebook and we didn't have Twitter and whatever else they use today. So you can understand that, and they do have to be careful. I think sometimes some of the players ought to be given a media lesson to show how to be conducted in an interview. What questions you're likely to get. I mean, a journalist is never going to ask another one, was it right to send him off? They're never going to answer that. You wouldn't even ask that, not of a player. You might ask it of the manager, but you'd never ask a player that.
Yeah, now, talking about players, let's go back to Wayne Fereday, who we heard earlier on, a good local lad from Aldbury Whalley area. So he got his roots firmly in the Albion fan as he was growing up. But unfortunately, to start his career off, it wasn't really at the Albion because he was picked up by a scout from Queen's Park Rangers and whisked off there. So that was his early career. And then he eventually, of course, as we all know, came back to his boyhood club. And I went round to meet him recently. And something I didn't really realise is that when he went to QPR, he got a 2-year apprenticeship. But he only served the first year of his apprenticeship before he was put straight into the first team. So it must have been a fantastic thing for him to do as a youngster like that.
Yeah, you wouldn't get that now.
We've got a nice little clip of him here talking about his early career.
Well, mate, during the school days and all that leading up to it, I knew I was half decent. But then when I suppose it started to mainly kick in was when I got signed by Newton Albion, Sunday League side. And I understand it was one of those sides that literally went out and started picking all the better kids from around other sides and schools and whatever. And I think, so from then, I think it was, and like you say, we kicked on and we won most things across the board. And their manager at the time, I think there was 7 or 8 sides at Newton Albion, and the guy who looked over them all was a guy called Harry Maney, who was a QPR scout. And I think that for me was probably the start of me realising I was decent. I would never say ever all through my career I was a great player, because I wasn't, but I was decent. I was training at Spring Road up the Albion at the time, and QPR at the time. So in the school holidays I'd go to the Albion occasionally and then QPR and do. But QPR were the ones that said, when you leave school, we will give you, which it was then, an apprenticeship. So obviously I would have killed for the Albion to have said that, but it was a case of just keep training, go back training and see what happens. Whereas QPR literally said to me, when you leave school, we'll give you a 2-year apprenticeship. And I was lucky in respects I only served a year, but I had a 2-year apprenticeship, which back then meant cleaning the boots, cleaning the toilets, and I think the players when I was were probably players like Jerry Francis and all these guys that were playing when I was doing my apprenticeship. So yeah, it was a 2-year apprenticeship, which meant you did all the horrible jobs around the ground and all things like that. But as I said, I was lucky. I'd done a year, and then I got called into the first team. Tommy Docherty was the old Man United manager, was QPR manager at the time. Literally started the 70, I don't know if it was 79, 80 season, I think it was. The first team had an away game at Blackpool, and I think they got beat 1-0. And I was actually in the youth team on the same day, the Saturday. And we won, I can't remember who we played, but we won 5-1, and I know I scored a hat-trick. So the following week, the Tuesday evening, the first team were playing Bristol Rovers at home, and I was 17. I never played a reserve team game, literally youth team. And Tommy Docherty called me in to see him, and he said, "You're with the first team on the Tuesday." And of course, 17-year-old kid, only played youth team football. I literally thought, "What the heck is going on?" And I must admit, I was panicking. But I actually thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to be involved. Obviously, I'm just going to be around the squad that evening and whatever. This would have been a championship level now. So would that have been second division then? So and I turned up on the Tuesday night, and long story short, he pulled me in. He said, "You're playing, you're starting," and literally then the panic stations did kick in. He said, "You're starting the game, you're playing," and I think I played up front with Tommy Langley, the old Chelsea, and also in the team then was Bob Hazel, the old Bob Hazel, the old Wolves centre half, Glenn Roeder. I think there was players like that. Phil Parks might have been in goal still. So all of a sudden I'm with these guys in the first team and playing. Luckily for me, it went well. We won 4-0, and I scored 2 goals. So it was a great debut.
So how did these senior players react to the fact that a kid like yourself were coming in?
I think I don't really know. Honestly, don't really know, because I think I was panicking that much. They could have been saying whatever and I wouldn't have even known. But I assume they thought, well, wait a bit here. There's a kid. He's dragged this kid in. He's literally playing for the youth team on the Saturday, and now he's in with us. And I think the guy he dropped for me was Mickey Walsh, the old Blackpool centre forward. Yeah. So they must have thought, wait a bit, they're dropping somebody like that experience, and bringing a 17-year-old kid in who's playing for the youth team on the Saturday. But like you say, I suppose, meaning it went that well, I don't suppose they could have said a lot about it afterwards, because of the way the game went.
Yeah, so it must have been fantastic for Wayne as such a youngster like that to be playing with all those top stars in the first team. And it was quite strange for me, Billy, because I was coming out, walking from having met him, walking back down the road. I suddenly realised I got quite an obscure claim to fame, really, because you know what? Wayne Fereday's mum made me a cup of tea.
Really?
And you can't get more obscure than that, can you?
No.
And so it suddenly amused me, really, by that fact. And I began to think about other claims to fame. So I asked on Facebook pages like Forever Albion, Look Back in Albion, Realistic Albion, and groups like that. And I asked for some other obscure claims to fame. And I said, I wasn't disappointed. And here are a few of, well, some of the repeatable replies anyway. Bill, Bob?
Well, there was Alan Gill claims that Ali Robertson likes his cakes, and he also sold Derek Kevin a 3-piece suite and Darren Carter a set of leather dining chairs. Val Bailey wrote in and said that they actually bought Bobby Hope's car. Terry Imms, a lovely story this about Terry. His dad used to run the Halfords Lane Throstle Club, and Terry would secretly pour Jeff Astle a pint of lager after training in the quiet side of the lounge, where he'd be sitting in a corner. Nobody could see him. I mean, he shouldn't have been drinking. Terry was only 14 and should have been serving him, so it's a good job PC Plod were knocking on the door.
Yeah. They all used to drink. Stan Ireland used to knock Guinness back like it was going out of business. Sorry, Stan, if he's still about.
Harry Taylor says Bobby Robson once bought him an ice cream at a cricket match. Paul Roberts remembers he once asked Len Cantello for his autograph, and he gave him a lift home because he was out so late. And Alison Travis says she got in a taxi about 31 years ago with Nobby Stiles at Anfield, and he was lovely and said, "Aren't you a good girl for following the Albion?" That's nice.
Now, David Thompson records that he once got taken to a Millwall match in a police car, taken to there rather than from the ground in a police car. He said he was running down the road, chucking it down with rain with 5 minutes to go. The police car pulls up alongside him. he gives him a lift, turns on the blue lights, and dropped him and his little son right outside the turnstiles at the away end.
Blimey. David Taylor says every Friday my mate and me would go from school to Stan Jones's Cafe in West Bromwich High Street for dinner in 1967. There was always several players there, usually Jeff Hassel, Tony Brown, Graham Williams, Bobby Hope and John Kay. Jenny Hall discloses that Cyril Regis escorted her to a car after a Christmas party at the Odd Spot in Birmingham because he said it was too dark for her to walk on her own. True, gentlemen. And George Holland said he stood next to Albion goalkeeper John Osborne in a public toilet in Paignton in Devon in 1976.
Well, that's a claim to fame.
Well, there were a few other similar ones to that one, but I haven't included those. And finally, Dog Food Dave, who's a good mate of mine, good Albion fan. He runs the pet food stall in West Bromwich Market. That's how he got his name, in case you were wondering. And he says that Gary Robson used to come to his stall when he looked after Brian's dog. And he says, by the way, Rufus was the name of his dog. And finally, Heather says she was once in the Grand Hotel and sat on Colin West's knee. And she said, I felt like I was on cloud 9 for a week.
This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing.
Right, now somebody else who's got a claim to fame really is a man with a long-running connection with West Bromwich Albion. His name is Matt James. Now, some people might not know the name, but I certainly know the voice if you go to the Albion, because he's now in his 39th season of being the man behind the mic and doing all the announcing at the Hawthorns. So that's a tremendous record. Now, I think he's probably the third longest-serving announcer in the Football League and in the Premier League, because apparently the guy at Gillingham has been around for about 60 years. 60 years of it, Bill.
Blimey.
Can you imagine that? And the famous George, the announcer at Liverpool, he's been announcing for about 45 years,
Wow.
apparently. So that's fantastic. Now, I met up with Matt, a little bit earlier in the month, and this is what he had to say.
39th season coming up. I used to DJ in a club in Birmingham called Club 64, which is on the Hagley Road. And the secretary at West Brom at the time was Gordon Dimbleby. He used to be a member, and I just got to know him. I was an Albion fan. And then one evening, on Saturday night, I think, he just said, we're looking for a new DJ. Our DJ's leaving, or I can't remember which one it was. Are you interested? I said, yes, of course. So I had a meeting with the chairman, which was Sid Lucas at the time. And that was it. Got the job and been here ever since.
So that was 1985-ish then?
85, 86 was my first season. My first game was Oxford United, 1-1 draw. Imre Varadi scored, and my office was the end box in the Rainbow Stand closest to the away fans.
So how's that changed over the years then?
Well, I've had offices in different parts of the ground. I think I then went to the corner between Halfords and Smethwick, where Trevor Summers very kindly built me a shed, which I operated from a couple of years. And then when they were developing the stadium, I moved into the end box of Halfords Lane by the Smethwick end. Then went to the back of the Brummie, and then they demolished that to make room for more seats. So now I'm currently in the stand between Birmingham Road End and Halfords Lane. That's where my office is.
So a bit from Matt James there now, but there's even more. Listen to this, folks, because another claim to fame is that he travels a round trip of around 3,600 miles to get to a game.
Blimey. Has he got a day pass or something?
Day pass on the 74 bus.
You get there quicker than you would on the 74.
And the reason being that he actually lives in Lanzarote.
Oh, my God.
And he travels over. That's when the planes are working.
Yeah,
and he's never really had any serious problems, he said. And he travels by Ryanair as well.
Blimey.
And they must know him there. He must sit next to the pilot, I suppose, because he must get that friendly with them.
And if the pilot gets lost.
He probably knows more about the route than anybody else put together, I think. He's been doing that for about the last 10 years or so, and this is what he had to say about it.
we have a young daughter. She's 10 now, and I wanted to bring her up somewhere else. So we emigrated to Lanzarote in the Canary Islands, which we'd been to on holiday before anyway. It wasn't just turn up there. And we gave it 6 months to see how it went, and we're still there. So the family home's there, they stay there, my wife stays there, my daughter goes to school. I just fly backwards and forwards. I do tie it in with the games, but obviously I do other stuff around it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, after August till May, it's dictated to by the games. Obviously, if there's 2 in a week, Saturday and Tuesday, I'll stay. But it tends to be like this week, I'm here for Saturday, I'll go back Monday and then come back in 10 days for the next one on the next Saturday. So it's about, I think it's about a 3,600 mile round trip, I think.
But you could do that, say, 20 times?
Oh, easy 20 times a season, yeah. But yeah, that's about right, about 20 times a season, yeah.
Which do you use the same airline all the time?
It's always Ryanair.
So all the staff must know you then.
They do sometimes, yeah, they do, yeah. And I mean, the amount of times I travel, I need to do it as economically viable as possible, because the club don't cover that cost, obviously. But also, they're a good airline, whatever people say, there's always issues, but it's good flight times for me, so I always use them, and I tend to fly into East Midlands because it's more convenient.
All right. So your pubs come over on the Friday night or something?
I tend to come over on Thursday or Friday afternoon because obviously if something does happen, flight cancelled or bad weather, which we can have in the Canaries, the wind can stop you taking off. I've got that extra day then, or even Saturday morning to sort it. Yeah. And then going back, once again, if it's 100 quid on the Sunday or 40 quid on the Monday, I'll go on the Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you sort of have subsidise that cost by doing some DJing in local clubs?
Yeah. I'll, as I said, I'll fly in on Friday. I'll DJ Friday night at Hockley Social. I'll do the game here. Then I'll do Mama Ruse or something like that, or Albert Schloss or something, and maybe do some work on a Sunday afternoon, and then fly back Monday or Tuesday, or it's just what fits in at the time. But as I say, if it's 2 games in a week, then I'll stay for the whole week and kind of repeat the next weekend and then fly back. But once again, when the fixtures come out, you're going to be at home or away, but you can't go ahead and book the flight because they might change the game to a Friday or a Monday. So if it's a Monday, I'll stay an extra day, or if it's a Friday, I'll come back on a Wednesday. So you have to wait for Sky to have their pick first.
Yeah, which is a bit of a shame for everybody travelling, even in this country, and short railway journeys really around the country, isn't it? Yeah. But have you had any really bad experiences or close things when getting to matches?
No, so far so good. I think that's only through planning. As I said, if anything's cancelled, I have still got a bit of time. But so far, so good. Touch wood.
The way things are going on, you're obviously going to make you 40 years next season.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, yeah, 40 years.
So you must be one of the longest serving announcers in the country then, I suppose.
Yeah, I believe there's 2 more than me. One's at Gillingham, I think 60 odd years. George at Liverpool's 45, and then me. I've seen others at like 30, 32. The guy at Birmingham is a friend of mine. He's been there 17. So it seems to be something that you do for a while. But you have to support I wouldn't do it anywhere else because you haven't got that loyalty and commitment. So you have to be a fan to want to do it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, tremendous record there, really, from Matt James. Now, it's set me thinking, folks, the furthest people have ever travelled for a match. We won't discuss it now. Perhaps we'll open it up to viewers and listeners to see what they think. So, what's the furthest you've ever travelled for a match to watch the Albion? We'll perhaps we'll do some of the answers to that in the next programme. Now, sitting alongside us, as you will have heard, is David Instone, the great Express and Star journo, amongst other things. And you're quite well known these days for some of your publications. You've done a book called Mr. Albion, and the one that really caught my eye, and yours as well, Bob, I think, was a fantastic scrapbook all about the Albion in the 1970s. And I think you've done a similar one about Wolves in the 1970s as well, haven't you? So tell us a little bit about your books.
Yeah, I've written about 7 Albion books now. Had a count up last night, and I've been involved in 1 or 2 others, the Chris Lepkowski books. But it was in lockdown, and I'd just lost a load of work when we were all housebound. Didn't go to games, so I sort of just needed to fill my time really and keep myself more sane. So I'd always loved collecting and accessing football photos. They don't have to be sort of prehistoric or recent photos. My sort of preference was photos from, let's say, the 60s and 70s. So I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Albion photos sort of on my computer. Some of them accessed, I must say, by Laurie Rampling, who's a brilliant ally to many of us. But I just wanted to do a project that would give me the platform to use some of these pictures, and then I could write the words to go around them. So I had the idea of doing it for charity, an Albion 1970s scrapbook, which was a real labour of love. It's had a lovely, it's been very, very well received, I must say. People have said some lovely things about it. I absolutely adored doing it. It was a godsend to have something like that to do when there was no other work around. And there's over 500 Albion pictures in there, 160 pages, forward by John Weil. The thing I most enjoyed doing, I think, as a journalist, you enjoy sort of scratching perhaps where people haven't sort of been before. So I enjoyed getting pictures of some obscure games, Millwall away. I remember getting 3 pictures. Dave Rushbury was on them all. I think it was probably his debut actually. A game at York, Blackpool. We know the iconic pictures. Those are being used a lot. I mean, like the 5-3 at Manchester United, which I was lucky enough to be at. The footage of that is absolutely priceless. But behind those games and the Valencia games and and the Oldham game, which thankfully was on Match of the Day, there are many, many more games which have not been. Pictures of those had not surfaced, so I really enjoyed digging out some pictures, usually from newspapers in other parts of the country, regional newspapers, and loved putting those into some kind of order and doing the design and just offering a few more observations on the era, really. Because I mean, a lot of people lived through that, so I wasn't telling them too much they didn't know, but just a few more gentle observations, and hopefully the presentation of the book just recreated a load of happy memories.
Yeah, I think everybody can be really chuffed with the 1970s scrapbook, because if you were there at the time, as we were, Bob, it brings back super memories. But it's also great for youngsters to look at as well, because it's history in a nice, accessible way. It doesn't bore you to tears with too many facts and figures. Perish the thought. And there's lots of good newspaper headlines and varied layouts on the page, which make it look interesting to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, the interesting thing as well about that book, the 70s book, is because there are people out there, lads, fellas now, who've probably got fed up to the dad talking about the 70s and how good Albion were and what a great side they had. This book gives them the chance to relive that. I mean, if you're scratching around this Christmas for a book to give to your dad or your granddad, the 70s Albion scrapbook is the one you've got to get, because that will bring back so many memories for them.
Well, I mean, that was good, that, Bob. I think you'd ought to clip that bit. You can use that.
No, but
a
promo, that is.
A good bit of promo.
But it is, because they probably got fed up with reading about, sort of the 70s side and the Ron Atkinson side and what have you. They probably watch it on YouTube, but to actually get an insight into what it was like. I mean, you see there's so many people now, not my age, obviously, but of my son, not even my son's age, but of my grandson's age, who think football started when the Premier League started.
Yeah.
I mean, you've now got records that the Football Association records have been expunged for Premier Division records. And that is sad, because I always say, and I'm sure Dave will agree, the 70s, no matter what you were doing, that was the time to be a sports reporter in the Midlands, because it was all happening.
Terrific. Yeah, I'd concur with that. Yeah, I think the journalists were very lucky looking back.
Oh yeah,
Big Ron, John Barnwell at Wolves, Jim Smith at Blues. I didn't know Jim Smith. I know the others. Okay, Ron Saunders at Villa. We'll gloss over that one, but
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think the characters and the I'm so envious, Bob, of the access you had to the players. I wouldn't have been very good at that because as I've said before, I was quiet and reserved, and I wouldn't have found it easy to break into that circle when you did have access to all those players, probably on a social level as well as an aftermatch or training day level. I wouldn't have been great at that, but wow, I would have improved, and I would have got there eventually, and I would have loved trying. But I mean, three of us around this table, four of us are obviously misty-eyed about that generation. Can I just tell a quick story about Bob? The first Albion game I covered for the Express and Star.
Now, this could be interesting, Billy. You never know what he's going to say.
This partly ties in with the long journey business as well, because I was on the Rugeley Times, and a mate of mine said, "Do you fancy going to the pre-season tournament at Edinburgh, at Glasgow? Sorry, Albion are playing there." I said, "I'd love to go. Are you offering to drive?" He said, "Well, my car's off the road and I'm a bit skint. My girlfriend said we need to buy a new table for the dining room, all that stuff." He said, "But I'm prepared to hitchhike. Do you want to come with me?" So I said, "Well, yeah, okay, we'll go for it." So we planned to hitchhike on the Friday, and then on about the Thursday, he got pressure at home from his girlfriend, and he said, "I'm ever so sorry, mate. I'm going to have to let you down. I can't go." So I was into it by then, and I thought, well, I'm going. I'll go. So I hitchhiked. We lived in Stafford, which was like mid territory football wise. I didn't have that sort of opportunity to jump on an Albion supporters coach to an away game. I was 45, 50 minutes from West Brom. Couldn't afford to go on a train, couldn't afford to put petrol in the car to go all the way up there. So I hitchhiked, went to the game. Got a ticket for the press box through my own resourcefulness, and then about 10 to 3 or 10 minutes before, whenever the kickoff was, a message comes around the press box. Are there any Midlands journalists in here? So I sort of nervously put my hand up, and they said, "Will you have a word with these people? It's the Express and Star." So I spoke to the guy on the other end, Jim Wilson. He said, "What did you say your name was?" So I gave him my name. He said, "Right, do you know a bit about Albion?" I said, "Well, yeah, I think so. I do watch them a lot." He said, "We've got a problem with our reporter, Bob Downing. He's stuck on a train in Carlisle. His train's broken down. He's not going to make the kickoff. In fact, he's probably not going to make the game at all." So we had the Sporting Star then, although it was summer. I don't know, maybe the end of July. The Sporting Star came out through the year then. It was a summer paper as well. So they said, "Can you do us a kick-by-kick account on the game?" I said, "I'd absolutely love to." So I did it.
Oh, wow.
Then Bob, it was a draw played Southampton in a 4-team tournament at Ibrox, and 1-1 end of normal time. Bob arrives about 4:45, 10 to 5, and he says, I'll see it on from here. And so we described how Albion lost in the penalty shootout, and away we go. But that was my first Express and Star match report. But it had Bob's name on. They insisted Bob's name still went on. Must have done a good job.
And people think that's his best report ever.
No royalties on that. Did you buy him a pint after?
I never even knew about that.
Oh, right.
I remembered the train breaking down because I was with Jeff Wright, the photographer.
Yeah.
And I remembered the train breaking down at Carlisle. And me then, there was no mobile phones, remember?
No.
So I've had to get off the train, get to the station. I said, "How long's the train going to be?" I said, "Ooh, could be hours." Yeah. So I then made a transfer charge call. I made a transfer charge call to Wolverhampton and told them exactly what was going on. Yeah. And then when I got to Ibrox, I made a contact. You must have been on the phone then. And I think Dave must have said, "Bob's here now." I never knew they hadn't changed the byline.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah. They said they couldn't. They said it was technically. I now know what a story that was. But fair enough. They wanted their regular man's name on it. I understand that, even if it did hurt at the time.
Right, great stuff there. Now, just change the tone a little bit now, because sad news recently, wasn't it, of the death of Albion stalwart Alex Jackson. Now, I was not old enough to have seen him play, but I've met him a couple of times. But you must have seen him play.
Yeah,
Bob?
I saw him play. I was obviously still at school then. I always remember one little tale. This is the time when you could get autographs. You hadn't got to go into a queue. or wait for him to come into the club shop. And I was outside the Albion ground, and I was the only one there. And I thought, this is good, I'm going to get everybody here. And I thought, after a bit, it's a bit quiet. Anyway, Alex Jackson turned up in his car. And I thought, oh, great, somebody's come. So I got his autograph. He signed a couple of photographs for me. Like, Davey, I mean, you got newspaper pictures. And then he came out and he said, there's no players here, you know. And I said, well, where are they? He said, we're going to the new training ground in Spring Road.
Oh, Spring Road.
And I said, and he said, do you know where it is? And I said, no. He said, well, come on. He said, jump in the car, I'll take you. And I said, no, it's all right, Alex. I said, I've got my bike. And he said, all right then. He said, well, where do you... And he drew me a map of how to get to Spring Road.
Oh, well.
And that's, that's something you don't forget, And I got to Spring Road eventually. Everybody was there. And Alex came out and he said, oh, I'm glad you made it, mate. I'm glad you made it. And I thought, what a great bloke. And I've always had affection for him. Mm. And he was a sad news, yeah.
Yeah, and he certainly got a really good round of applause at the Hawthorns when it was his sad death was announced over the loudspeakers.
Former player Alex Jackson, who sadly passed away aged 86. He played for the club from 1954 to 1964 and worked for the Albion.
Right.
So there we are then, the sad passing of Alex Jackson. Now, from death to birthdays, really, and I don't want this to sound like two-way family favourites, but I want to say happy birthday to somebody. Colin McKenzie, who was mentioned on the programme recently, the big stato man from the Albion, is celebrating his 80th birthday this month, so happy birthday. And he came up with a cracking stat for us from the recent Albion game against Middlesbrough, and that Michael Force, the man who scored the Borough penalty in that 2-1 win, 4-2 win recently, was an Albion youth, and he came on as a sub in September 2016 when Albion played India side Delhi Dynamos. Wow, how about that? And not many people know that.
No, I don't.
Not many people know that, which nicely brings us round to the quiz of the week.
Oh, here we go.
Right, we've only got about 5 minutes left, so we'll rattle through this quickly today then. Billy, you ready with the scores?
Yep, I'm here.
So it's David versus Bob. Just shout out.
You have warned him that we
answers.
do cheat on this.
Oh, no, we haven't. We don't cheat.
No, we don't cheat.
Right, just shout out the answers, chaps. So, number one. All things have happened in the month of September. Who made his Albion debut 60 years ago this month in a 2-1 win at Ipswich?
Tony Brown.
Tony Brown.
Cool.
2. Ian Collard made his Albion debut in September of which year?
64.
1964, well done. Why did Albion get an extra point following a win against Swansea in September 1981?
Ooh.
It was the introduction of 3 points for a win.
Exactly, well done, yes. In September 63, how many goals did Jimmy Cookson score when Albion beat Blackpool 6-3?
7, 8, 7, 6.
It was 6-3. It was 6-3, but so you couldn't have scored more than that.
Shall we give him that?
3 own goals.
I think we better give him that. He got there eventually.
We'll give him that.
Who made his record-breaking 633rd Premiership appearance in September 2017 when he was playing for the Albion?
Gareth Barry.
Gareth Barry, good. Who completed his 1,000th game as manager in September
1,000.
2016? Yeah.
Tony Pulis.
Tony Pulis,
yeah.
indeed.
Ooh. Come on, Bob.
September 78, Albion played home and away against which side in the UEFA Cup?
Go on, Bob. You must have
You
been
must
there.
have been there at
Galatasaray.
Galatasaray, good.
Oh, I'm sweating here.
Wow.
Tight, this
In
is.
September 74, who became Albion chairman?
Bert Millichip.
Sir Bert Millichip. And what's the score?
It's 4-3.
Oh,
Come on, Bob.
And last question. In September 1963, Doug Fraser made his debut, having signed from
Aberdeen.
Oh, it's a tie. He's got a tie break.
break. Oh, well, I've got a tie break. I'll go on a quick tie break. Let's make one up. September 1970, the Football League beat the Irish League at Carrow Road which Albion player scored twice?
Tony Brown.
His last representative game for his country.
Jeff.
Jeff Astle.
Oh,
sorry,
Bob. What are you doing,
I
mate?
jumped in too quick.
Too quick.
Okay. That's the equivalent of a two-footed
5-4.
challenge. So our champion today is David
David, well done,
Instone.
Dave.
Yay. Great stuff.
Right, so how long have we got? We haven't got
You've
all
got
that much
about
time left.
2 minutes, 2 and a bit minutes.
Two and a bit minutes.
Yeah.
One of the players who doesn't get all that much coverage is somebody we just mentioned there, David. Is Ian Collard. You know, you saw his debut, didn't you? I think.
Did.
Yeah.
My very first game at Albion, taken by my dad, of course, was Albion 1, Burnley 2 in middle of September 1964. It was Ian's debut. Can't remember what position he played. Might have been at left back. No, Bobby Cram scored a penalty for Albion's goal. They always lost 2-1 at home to Burnley in those days. So just the expected score. But I've got to know Ian a little bit. I once met him over at Ipswich when I did a piece with him, and I organised a reunion dinner of the 1968 Cup winning team in 2003, and Ian came across to that, and I remember he and Bobby Hope sitting together and enjoying each other's company. I also saw Ian at Bobby's funeral last summer. Surprised me a bit because I thought Ian had a good Ipswich career after leaving Albion. Albion, he was always in a bit in and out, wasn't he? Never one to have a sort of regular place, although he came good in the cup year, of course, and played at Wembley. But he always seemed to be a little bit on the edge of it at Albion. I thought he had a good career at Ipswich, but he surprised me by saying he regretted going to Ipswich. I know he played European football for them, and he played under Bobby Robson. I thought he must have been very fulfilled there, but he
wasn't he the make weight in a Danny Egan transfer?
Yes. He moved at the same time, didn't he?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Whether that's the right phraseology, but
yeah, but I mean, I think it was Collard and money.
Yes, I think
they wanted Collard, but they rated Danny Egan a little bit more. But he was, he was part of that deal.
I should suggest Ian Collard was lower maintenance than Danny Hegan.
Yeah, certainly. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Stories about him, haven't we? Yeah. Now then, just before we go, thanks very much, David, for coming in. You're going to leave a couple of your books there, so we haven't got time for the quiz question now, but we'll perhaps have one in the next programme with the chance to win one of your books. Now you can catch up with our programmes throughout the weeks on Black Country Radio Xtra and Black Country Radio, also on TNT News, and now we're also on Spotify as well, so that's been going well. Just search for the Throstle Club. So that's about it. Goodbye. Thanks for listening.
This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing.